But basically where we are now is that in Italy, GDP is roughly 10% below the pre-crisis level. In Spain, it's now about 7. They are very, very slowly recovering. In Portugal, it's about 6 or 7. In Ireland, it's now about 5. And in Greece, it's now still way over 20. So they're all vastly poorer than they were before the crisis. In GDP per head terms, it's worse. Unemployment rates in Greece are still, of course, close to 30%. In Spain, it's still way over 20%. And in the other countries, it's in the teens. My estimate is that the most successful countries might get back to pre-crisis GDP per head and pre-crisis unemployment rates sometime around 2020. So it varies for the different countries. We can go through them, but essentially it's more than a lost decade. It's well over a lost decade. And as a consequence of this, in many countries, a large proportion of able and educated young people have emigrated. And that's a very important part of the adjustment mechanism, which many people are very worried about because, of course, these are the people on whom the longer-term future rests. So the key point I want to make on where we are is it's been an unbelievably costly crisis. In aggregate, it's in large part been, a lot of the adjustment has been externalized, but inside the Eurozone, the crisis-hit countries suffered colossal recessions. They are beginning to recover, not really in Greece, but in the other countries, but it is going to end up as worse than a lost decade. That's the story. And high unemployment remains significant, and for that reason, emigration is also significant. And the longer run political consequences, I think, will be severe. One of the things that I've become increasingly aware of, I can see this in Britain now, is that the long run political consequences of large economic shocks come through quite slowly, as people begin to realize this isn't just a little blip. This is a fundamentally different world from the one we thought they were. So we've got so what are the problems they have now? Where are they now? Well, one, we have a vulnerable recovery, as I've indicated, but because of the policy settings in the Eurozone today, and above all, the extreme dependence on central bank financing, radical central bank financing in QE with ultra low interest rates, they have next to no ability to respond to any new shocks. There's just nothing in this. There is no capacity to respond to large negative shocks. There's been a severe loss of public trust that we have at the core of the Eurozone, as I've indicated, with its colossal German surplus. The most creditworthy country in the Eurozone has very, very weak domestic demand. So demand growth depends on the external world. It depends very heavily on what happens elsewhere. The UK is actually the Eurozone's most important trading partner. The US, China, all this matters very, very, very much. And the two other real vulnerabilities are debt, both private and public, has universally, not both, either private or public or both has risen in every country. So they're much more heavily leveraged than they were before. Underlying trend growth in all countries is pretty low. Very few countries have trend growth above 2%. Spain might, no one else does. In Italy, it looks close to 0. That makes management of debt very difficult. And there's a real risk of re-emergence of imbalances. So there is a recovery, cyclical recovery, but it leaves huge structural weaknesses which have a very profound political effects.